my notes again.
We're about to get started here. If you want to make your way to your seats. Awesome, thank you. Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Matt. I'm going to be the moderator for this evening's VC Investing panel, and I'm very excited to be joined both by Robert Lee of Draper Dragon Fund as well as Juan Acosta of Draper University as well as Draper University Ventures. Before we dive into the panel, I just want to spend a couple of moments going over the agenda as well as thanking our volunteers and sponsors. So for those of you that have joined us in the past and kind of know the deal, we are going to do fireside chat first with Robert, then with Juan. Then we'll open up to a broad panel on VC investing. Then we'll have an open panel or audience Q&A. That all should wrap up around 8:10, 8:20, and then we'll have time for a little bit of networking at the end. Our sponsors include Epic Events, 360 Lab SF, Surfy, which is an AR and computer vision startup located in the South Bay. They are enabling spatial awareness in ground cameras like the ones in your cell phone or AR glasses. It's actually a really critical technology in sort of overall augmented reality stack. I actually interned at Surfy this past summer in between the first and second year of my MBA at Berkeley. So if anyone is interested in computer vision, augmented reality, I'm happy to talk more about that after the panel. Finally, we're sponsored by 51VR, which is China's oldest and largest VR company. They specialize in applications in real estate, education, and mobility. So now let's jump right into the panel. We're going to start first with Robert Lee and his fireside chat. Please welcome both Robert and Juan. Awesome. Thanks, guys, for being here. And Robert, I wanted to start really kind of before your career, before school, and just take us back to your early childhood, where you grew up, and what were some of your interests and influences?
Sure, yeah. And if we had to take it to the very beginning, I was born in Canada, and I spent most of my early childhood, this is like prior to 5 or 6 years old, in New York. Back then, my parents were working in Manhattan. And at around 6 years old, my whole family moved to China, in Shanghai. And that's actually where I lived most of my life prior to college.
Gotcha.
So, it's a lot of my exposure is kind of cross between two worlds, right? One is in China and at the same time exposed to Western, culture, Western influences.
Right.
I went to an international school in Shanghai, Shanghai American School, right? I did my undergrad at Penn, which is in Philadelphia. So I came back to the U.S. for that. And there I studied management and finance with a special emphasis on venture capital and tech, innovation-related strategy at Penn.
Okay. Right. What was sort of that initial shock like moving across the world at such a young age? What was that experience like?
Quite honestly, I don't remember too much of it, right? But I think, for my whole life, I've been kind of straddling those two worlds, the Eastern and the Western world, right? And, I grew up speaking both languages, both Chinese and English. And, it's a mixture of those two cultures in the household. And, my friend groups and the people I'm surrounded by, it's also a mix of those two.
Gotcha. And so while you were in middle school, you worked on a really interesting NGO, Social Responsibility Foundation. So can you tell us a little bit about that NGO, kind of how it came to be and where it's at today? Because it seems like it might still actually be ongoing.
Sure, yeah. And Social Responsibility Foundation, SRF, is still active. Back in middle school, I had discovered microfinance. I was reading on what I could possibly do with about $500 worth of my pocket money, right? So I was thinking about investing it, and I was wondering how I could best leverage my capital, right? And purely by chance, I had discovered Muhammad Yunus's book. So Muhammad Yunus, for those of you who don't know, he used to be a professor at Vanderbilt University, an economics professor, and a lot of his study was on social justice, right? And he's written several books since, very influential books, and that actually influenced me to do that. He won actually the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in his home country of Bangladesh. He built a bank called Grameen Bank, and I think it's in his native language. It's called Village Bank, Grameen. And with this bank basically proved that it can be profitable and feasible to lend to an oftentimes underserved and unaddressed market population, which is, the poor, right? The people who do not have a stable income and who do not have collateral, are not considered to be creditworthy under the traditional sense of what is creditworthy, right? And so, at around that time, I decided to, get a lot of my friends. Essentially, it was me and a few friends who we use this online P2P microfinance platform to lend microloans to poor farmers in China across. At first, it was 4 different provinces, right? And the farmers in China have a very similar lack of access to capital. This need is very similar to the poor Bangladesh, peasants, right? That Grameen Bank was addressing. And so we found out that, as little as $100 may not mean much to us, but can be a day and night difference for a lot of these people living in, remote rural areas in China, right? And since then, it's grown to become what is more than 500 members worldwide. Most of these are, people who are in their middle school or high school, and all of them are using, microloans to help poor people in China. And we've also expanded to doing different kinds of activities, such as, becoming a distribution channel to reach customers in city hubs, metropolitan areas, right? And where we take a very minor cut, allowing them to, get a bigger chunk of the profit, right?
That's amazing. That's really great. And it sounds like, what you're doing now kind of focused on fintech and blockchain. Was SRF sort of the seed, I guess, that sowed your interest in those 2 spaces?
Absolutely. I think SRF is where my interest in fintech, right now in venture capital, I tend to focus on fintech related investments. And that's where my interest originally took off, right? And I think there's a huge business opportunity in banking the unbanked, and solving some of the finance needs for people who are constantly being ignored by the banking systems.
Interesting. And kind of related to that, I think, especially since I've come out to the Bay Area, I moved from Chicago a year ago, and so while I've been at Haas, especially, I've heard so much about impact investing and learned a ton about it. And I'm curious, for you, someone that sort of worked on the NGO side and now is a traditional VC investor, how do you view impact investments that are sort of, for-profit businesses solving these kind of pressing social needs?
Yeah, so I think how I would answer that question is, most people think that the 2 goals of profit making and creating social impact are mutually exclusive. That people think that, charities and philanthropic activities are not money making and vice versa, right? But I do believe that, these 2 things can be combined. There are profit-making opportunities that end up creating great social impact, right? There are these great social businesses. And I think that, over time, the work of people like Mohammed Yunus would certainly prove that. But, I would say that there is a minority of people from the investment community who view the world from this double bottom line kind of mindset, right? Sadly, they're not the majority of people, but people who care about not just financial impact, and what's the return on invested capital, but not just, but also, what are the kind of the differences in the world.
Right. So it sounds like you're saying that there's, a specific set of opportunities that are maybe best suited for nonprofits and government, specific set that are best suited for traditional investors that are completely returns focused, and then there is a set of opportunities that actually is best suited for that impact investor in the middle that's really looking at the bottom line but brings more of a business approach to that solution.
Absolutely, and I think that that last camp of investors is becoming ever more vital to the modern world.
Absolutely. And so in a similar vein, talking about how you've been sort of on the nonprofit and for-profit side, you've also in VC worked in corporate VC with Cisco, as well as traditional VC with Sequoia and now Draper Dragon. How would you describe the differences in your experience doing corporate VC versus kind of more traditional VC, and how did those differences inform your decision to work in traditional VC in your full-time career?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it's a very simple difference, right? CVCs, when they invest, they're not purely driven by the motivation of financial return. So for example, traditional VCs, we invest in something because we think that this thing will become huge in the future. And we buy in when they're a $5 million company with the expectation that in 10 years they'll be a $500 million, or a $5 billion company, right? Whereas I think when CVCs invest, there's a much more complex interplay of different motivations to, bet money on something, right? Sometimes, not always, financial returns are part of that equation. But more often than not, the CVCs invest for the kind of strategic benefits that it can bring to the parent company, right? And for example, let's say a semiconductor company invests in a potential upstream supplier, right, or a potential future customer. And therein is like, how do I source cheaper components into the future? Even though the companies that they invest in may not become that kind of billion-dollar unicorn, they invest in it because it makes financial sense for the bigger organization, in a more long-term, complex way, right?
And so, somewhat related to that, I'd love to hear more about kind of what you're doing today, as well as what brought you back to Draper Dragon Fund, because it sounds like you also interned there in the past too. So maybe some of the things that you saw doing CVC versus traditional VC brought you eventually back to Draper Dragon full time.
Yeah. So, by the way, to answer your earlier question about why CVC versus traditional VC and why I returned to work for traditional VC, I think it's fairly simple, right? At a traditional VC, your investment decisions and the outcomes of those decisions can be better benchmarked against those of others. And so it's better, you can more easily say who's a better VC, who's not, what is a good decision, what is not a good decision by one VC to the next, right? It's much more complicated comparing, a CVC who's working for the parent company of Intel or Cisco to somebody who's working for Google, right? The kinds of returns you're getting are not apples to apples, they're apples to oranges, right? And why I decided to come back to Draper Dragon ultimately is that, so I interned with Andy Tang, who's my current boss, back in the summer of 2016, and had a great relationship working with him. And I like the small team dynamic in the sense that I find that my input is best able to be leveraged and translated into results and decision making, right? In a smaller, leaner team than, for example, if I was at Sequoia China, where I was previously, right? Where the investment team is 70 people, right? Of course, it would be subdivided into smaller teams looking at specific subsectors. But even then, it's a very rigorous, almost bureaucratic decision-making process moving forward, right? Yeah.
And so maybe just to wrap up here with this fireside, can you give us a little bit of insight just into your day-to-day role, kind of at the level that you're at within the group?
Can you clarify the question?
Yeah. Just as an investor that's a couple of years out of college, what is exactly like the day-to-day role of sort of your work with Draper Dragon versus maybe a partner, for instance?
Sure. I mean, I would say the job of a VC analyst is very diverse. There's a lot of things to do, right? And your day from one day varies quite widely from that of the next, right? So it can be anywhere from taking conference calls and meetings with potential new companies that we're investing in, to doing desktop research on deals we're performing due diligence on. It can be, let's say, trying to add value in a multitude of different ways to portfolio companies of ours that we've already committed capital towards, and even helping old mature companies from our earlier funds to think about how do we exit, right? And you know, the job of a partner, for example, may also include, you know, managing LP relationships, trying to raise a new fund, things like that.
Gotcha, cool. Well, I'm really looking forward to digging more into kind of the specific areas that you're looking at within VC, but for now, really appreciate learning more about your background, and ready to turn it over to Juan for the fireside.
Cool. Awesome. By the way, Robert sees out of the ecosystem that we have, including, and I'll go a little bit into what we do at Draper U and Draper U Ventures, but any of the deals that we see for Draper U Ventures, which is like pre-seed, very early on, if it's fintech related, blockchain related, the only person that we go to is literally Robert. So if you're in the crowd and this is the kind of guy that you want to connect with afterwards, and I've learned a crap ton from him over the past year that we've been, you know, in sister companies. But anyway.
No, that's great. Cool. I'd like to start your fireside kind of similar to the way that we started Robert's. And you know, I got a chance to read your Medium article, and for anyone that isn't connected with Juan on LinkedIn, or find him on LinkedIn, find his Medium page. Awesome story, man. It was really, really cool to read. So I'd love to hear more about, you know, just again your early childhood background, kind of what brought you to the U.S.
Sure. So I was born in Venezuela, and I came over to the U.S. When I was about 9 years old. My dad he didn't start a business then, he got hired. One really cool thing is he had this vision of always wanting to be in the U.S., you know, free country, etc., and he made it happen. It was awesome. But anyway, he came here and he started, after a few years of working for a company, they laid him off and he started another company. And this was my first taste of entrepreneurship, in a sense. He started a company without knowing a single word of English and had like 60 employees that all spoke English, no Spanish. And it did awesome, and it did better than the previous company that had hired him. So I saw that growth. And that was, I think, my first job. I got into coding and I developed a product there that they used every day. So, you know, I taught myself how to code back then, and it was cool. I mean, it wasn't like a fancy software or anything, but really I got to see the growth of the business, and then I also got to see like the full decline of it. My dad got sick at one point, and during that time I learned a lot about people, how people treat other people in times of success and in times of, you know, challenges. So I learned a lot about people, and I got really, I wouldn't recognize it then, but now we were actually talking on the Uber right here. Like I'm really interested in people and leadership, and how to make that even better, and how to communicate. So as entrepreneurs, the ones that we train, that's one of my passions is, you know, how to reach investors and how to communicate and all these things. Like, I'm really passionate about that just because I really love the psychology behind entrepreneurship. So anyway, I saw that decline, and let's see, that's kind of how I got to this country. And I went and studied aerospace engineering, and after my first year, I dropped out. And it wasn't, I was a great student, excellent, like this was gonna be my career forever. And then my dad's business failed, so I had to help financially. And so I switched over to, you know, product, which back then was just me trying to convince people to hire me. If I may say, I know this is being recorded, but maybe we cut it out. Like, at one point, I was actually not legal in this country. And it was very difficult, and please cut this out. It's just for this. It was very difficult, you know, during that time, but I think it taught me a lot about people, and it gave me the entrepreneurial muscle to try and get what I wanted without having the same resources as other people. And I think that's really, like in entrepreneurship and what we usually teach to our young entrepreneurs, and I'll go into that in a little bit, is that resourcefulness and the ability to fight through that. So I learned a lot during that time, and I switched over to product and built a few things, and then landed here.
And so you you were just alluding to this, kind of your resourcefulness is kind of what took you from the aerospace engineering background into product. Before we move away from that background, do you have any advice for anyone in the audience that's thinking about moving into product management in terms of how they should think about that transition? What kind of skill sets are really necessary to be successful in that role?
By the way, if you're going to start a company or you're starting a company, I think the best quality of any CEO that we've ever seen is if you're a great product manager at the very beginning, that's what's going to define you from a lot of other companies. So product management skills are awesome. What does it take? It takes empathy and understanding of a customer pain point. So you could see that a lot of product managers go and start their own companies because they have this skill set. A little bit of technical knowledge would be awesome because you get to communicate. And then the business knowledge, all of these three things combined makes a great product manager. I didn't know I was a product manager until like years after. We were creating software and I was leading like a group of developers for two companies that I was at and talking to customers and talking to partners, and it was this like, you wear a lot of different hats. And then I realized once I learned more about tech, et cetera, that was called product management. So then I decided to go and take more formal product management courses, and it just solidified a lot of that product experience. So when we invest in founders or when we're training founders, I think a lot of the value that I personally bring, and I think every investor out there is not just about the money, it's about the value they bring. Robert brings an extreme industry expertise, the network that Draper Dragon has, especially cross-border. If you're going to China or from China to here to the US, it's like unlike any other. With us, which we invest a lot earlier, it's about the value that we can provide to the founders. And I take pride whenever we invest in someone to really help them with the product and get from whatever they have to the next level in terms of product.
Yeah.
So that's my personal.
And so today, obviously you're working with entrepreneurs every day, but you also yourself were an entrepreneur, have been, I think, on a couple of occasions. What was it? Maybe it was the product management experience, but what was it that really kind of gave you the courage and confidence to sort of take that leap into entrepreneurship?
I started a few companies. They weren't massive or anything. One was a web agency. We did all the digital media and websites for local businesses. I got a chance to pitch to really like high caliber people, like small internet influencers, and that was awesome. So I learned a lot there. And then I started a bunch of other things that completely failed, and it was a shit show. So the question was the entrepreneurship, what led me into entrepreneurship?
How did you
Yeah, the ability, where failure, when you start seeing failure as not failure, but learning, you can dive into anything, into any experience. Honestly, I'll tell you a story as to how Draper U Ventures started. I had no clue what investing in founders was, a few years ago. And just being able to dive in and ask the right people and learn from the right people, I think that's what an entrepreneur is. So just diving in without seeing that wall that society places in front of us of just failure, it's going to get you or you're not going to get a job. I dropped out of school twice, one for financial reasons, the other one for fulfillment issues. And it's just the ability to just see and turn any little resource into something bigger. And see the opportunity in everything. In no way, shape, or form do I think I'm at a level of success or anything close to it. But I think I was telling one of our participants here, fulfillment. Now, fulfillment-wise, if you can achieve fulfillment, you're successful. So in the things that you do with starting a company or you switch over to the investor side, being fulfilled, I think that's success in my book, and currently I'm very fulfilled.
And I noticed in your early career, you also had some operating experiences too, whether it was programming, as you mentioned, PM, BD, marketing, things like that, maybe more. But did you feel like those, functional experiences, did they prepare you to become an entrepreneur, or is it something that you can't really prepare for? You kind of just have to jump into it?
Oh, I learned a lot. Like, I started this, because I worked at a company, I was like the product manager of this wireless service provider, and we built software for different stores for them to activate wireless service for other people. I learned so much there, and one of the first products I built on my own was because of that industry expertise that I had, or the connections I had made. So I definitely see it as a big advantage to have some operational experience. But the biggest thing, I think, and we see it in the founders that we fund, sometimes they have no operational experience whatsoever, but they just have something, and that's what I'm trying to define. I'm trying to put like a metric to it, like I'm doing this big study on emotional intelligence with our batches. And some of them have never had operational experience, but they're just killing it right now, and they're doing really well. So with the work that we do, we're trying to define what that is. I'm not exactly sure what it is yet, but perseverance is one of the big ones.
Yeah, I want to get back to that emotional intelligence when we get into the broader conversation of kind of what you all think about when you're working with whether entrepreneurs or startups, et cetera. But to finish off this far side, I'd love to, you talked a little bit about Draper University, Draper U Ventures, but there's any other background that you want to give? And then I've seen that you've had kind of a number of different roles sort of in that system. So if you could just talk us through kind of what your roles have been to date and what you're up to today.
Sure, so maybe I can give background as to what the heck the Draper ecosystem is, because I don't think you can go online and find it all in a concise way. But basically, it's taken Tim 30 years, Tim Draper, to build this huge ecosystem. And that ecosystem involves different players, and he's involved in every single part of that ecosystem. The first one, he has this foundation. He's currently building this massive maker space in San Mateo. No one knows about it, but some of our portfolio companies work out of there. And it's basically for companies building any hardware. So we have 3D printers and a bunch of other stuff. No one really knows about it. It's like the newest thing that we have. We have Draper University, which we consider a pre-accelerator. So before, when you make the leap to actually starting a company, there's a huge gap in terms of learning from whether you've worked in a company or whether, you're fresh out of college. There's a huge gap in learning in terms of the things that you need to actually launch. And the traditional accelerators like Y Combinator 500, which are all great programs, they're not going to take you if you're not at a certain level. So we see that big gap. We select the best people in that gap, and we fully focus on those people, not only in the tools they need to launch or to create their products. And we've had some crazy, amazing success stories. I know this is all about blockchain, but Quantum, for example, Quantum was born at Draper University with 3 alums that came together and launched Quantum. And there's a few other good blockchain companies that have come out of it. But basically, we train people and train leaders and live with them for 5 weeks. So we have this huge hotel building where the founders live with us. Sometimes it's idea stage. I would say half the class is idea, half the class has a product and has a small team in some part of the world, and we invest globally. Then we started Draper U Ventures, which is the investing arm of the school, and we invest mostly in our alumni companies. Why? We'll get into that later, our thesis behind it. But basically we do very small checks. We're the first believers. No one else has invested in these companies. We're the very first believers in them. That's what we focus on with Draper U Ventures. Then we also have a co-working space with great companies that have come out of there. Zoom and PayJoy, we're all incubated there. There is, the Draper Venture Network, which is 24 venture capital firms all over the world. So that's kind of, if you connect with one of us, that's kind of like the ecosystem that's part of it, which we would love to, plug you in somehow. So it's 24 VC firms. They're all connected by this back office in San Mateo. So Draper Dragon is one of them. So that's, cross-border, China, US, and they invest in all sorts of things. We have, for example, in Europe, if you want to expand into Europe, we have Draper Esprit, which does investments there. We have a few funds in Latin America. We have one in Africa. We have really anywhere. there's a Draper fund, Draper-related funds. These funds are independent, but they're all connected by this network. And that's part of the ecosystem. That's taken 30 years to build for Tim. But Tim's very involved in all aspects of it. And so we have something for every stage of an entrepreneur's journey, from the very beginning where they're just experimenting with ideas to growth stage funds and past Series B, etc., all over the world. So that's kind of like a condensed version of what we do. Yeah,
That's great. That's really wonderful.
and then what I particularly do, which I think was the question, was I train entrepreneurs and I focus, no matter if they have a product or an idea, I focus on them as people, and I live with them for 5 weeks, and we do crazy stuff. One of those things, for example, is Survival Week, where we bring in military leaders from all sorts of military branches, and we stick them in a remote area that no one knows where it is, and it's a survival experience for a few days, and it's a true survival experience. And so we do a lot of unconventional learning, and all of that applies to the startups. So far, we've trained 1,000 people. They've created 360 active startups. They've raised over 220 million in venture funding. They are from 70 different countries. So really, we focus on the people. That's a big aspect of what I do, and then we invest in some of them. Yes. Awesome.
Well, again, really great learning about your specific background, and I think now we'll open it back up to the broad panel here and kind of talk broadly about VC investing, kind of how you guys go about it. So, just to start, you both have operational background, whether it was with DD Chushing or as an entrepreneur yourself. How have those experiences, as kind of sitting on the other side of the table, how have those experiences affected the way that you all approach investing?
Sure. Like I mentioned before, I focus on the people. At such an early stage, whether it's a blockchain company or someone building stuff with AI, you don't know what the future is like for those companies. The product may change 50 times. Everything may change. So many variables in the market. So when we invest, yes, we look at the market. Is it a big enough market? Is there a big opportunity, like Robert was saying before? But a lot of what we do is in the person. So we would never invest in someone that we haven't actually worked with. So from the operational side, what's great is that we get to be involved with our founders operationally before we even invest. And not that many people get to say that we spend so much time with them and actually help and provide value and get them to the next level before we even consider them for investing. And then we take super early bets.
I want to add a little bit on to what Juan mentioned, is that he hit up on a very important point, which is there are certain qualities that someone who has been in an operating role, especially at a startup company, right, could understand about the companies and the entrepreneurs that they invest in, right? And in that sense, maybe by being able